Hi, thanks for joining us on Inside Curtin. I'm Michelle. In this episode, we learn more about the Indigenous Cultural Awareness training on offer at Curtin. Meet the student making a documentary on a member of the Hockey Roos as he heads to the Rio Olympics. Still on hockey, we find out about the interesting study our students and academics have been undertaking to prevent a particular sports injury. And hear from a group of final year students on their thoughts about how the student experience at Curtin can be improved. A knowledge of our local Indigenous culture and heritage is valuable to have and can be useful in many careers, which is why we have a number of different ways to learn about this rich history for both students and staff.
The Indigenous Cultural Capabilities Framework, which Curtin University has developed for staff and students. There's 3 stages. The first stage is sort of like a beginning level where the staff have the opportunity to do the long-running program operated out of CAS, the Centre for Aboriginal Studies, which is our ways of working, and they get a real good introduction around Aboriginal society and culture. And that's you can do 3 different levels of that under its new structure. Stage 2 is a more cultural development stage where there's the opportunity for staff to participate with me with on-country cultural immersion visits in and near the metropolitan area. Stage 3 takes it a step further where you can do a 3 to 4 day cultural immersion visit in places like Walloona or now and up down in the southwest. I suppose in a university context it's for particularly academic staff. It's about how they might use Aboriginal aspects, Aboriginal culture, Aboriginal principles in their curriculum, whatever it might be. All staff at Curtin University, through the Reconciliation Action Plan, have a responsibility to know and understand and be aware of Aboriginal culture, and that's what we're trying to do. The framework is directed to staff, but there's also a component for students, and that's about on-country visits that I do for students a week at a time each semester. Taking people on country is getting people out of the classroom. I mean, you can teach Aboriginal studies in the classroom, but the best way to teach Aboriginal studies is to take people out on country and introduce them to the land and a concept I call Budyanne. And Budyanne is about listening to the land. And Noongar people, Aboriginal people do it all the time. When we're out on country, we listen to the land. It's not only using your ears and listening to the land, but it's feeling, touching, smelling, seeing and hearing the land and the natural environment and the things around you, whether they're animals, birds, insects and things like that. So you're actually right there in the landscape and you feel part of country in being there rather than being in a sort of decontextualised place in a classroom.
You can find out more about the courses on offer at the Centre of Aboriginal Studies. As we've mentioned before, thanks to our partnership with Hockey Australia, our students are getting involved at many different levels. One of those is the making of some documentary films on the players as they follow the road to Rio.
I'm a student here at Curtin University. I do screen art as a major and performance art as a minor. The reason why I got involved with Hockey Australia was because they joined Curtin University and offered an opportunity for students to interview and do stories on their teammates that are going to Rio.
I made the national squad in 2003, a year earlier, but I broke my ankle twice. Probably thought my dream of the Olympics was over.
We've been following the story of the Olympic champion Mark Knowles. We have 2 stories to tell, and one is a family story and one is actually to sort of get people excited to watch the Olympics. I got to meet Mark and his family. They let us into their home, let us go and watch them, train and practice really hard. I really learnt very rapidly as a screen art student to be far more prepared. I think that was one thing, we got the opportunity and we kind of ran for it rather than just sort of sit down and nut it out a little bit better. And I think when you're dealing with that sort of situation, you actually learn at a much faster rate and a rapid rate versus just in class experiences. Without a doubt, I had the biggest learning curve through this process. feel extremely grateful for the opportunity to work with Hockey Australia. They have been incredibly generous with their time and their effort that they've given us to sort of help teach us what's required for a world audience. Hockey Australia, has, within the first 3 weeks of being released, went to nearly 30,000 people worldwide. At this stage, I'm not exactly sure where we're at now, but that audience, for a student to get that kind of audience, is just an amazing opportunity. It's one that you can't underestimate the impact of being able to produce some work for a company versus just our student work.
We're always looking at new ways to improve the experience here at Curtin. And what better way than by talking to the students who are living it?
Thank you for joining me here today. I want to ask you a few questions about how your course experience went here at Curtin. Now, you're all within a few months of sort of wrapping up here. How good of a job did Curtin do in preparing you for your next step, whatever that step is?
I think very, very well. I'm currently actually working in marketing already, so I've been working in it for about 9 months now, and it was the fact that Curtin does prepare you so well from the second you step through the door that gave me the opportunity to start working pretty much full-time in my field already.
I think the greatest thing that Curtin has been able to give me is the ability to recognise and reflect on what I've done, because a lot of the times part of our assessment you have to reflect and you have to write about what you've actually learned, where you tie it back. And to me that's the most important thing, because when you actually go into the workforce, everything you do you have to evaluate. And even in the units as you go along, if you're reflecting on what you're learning and what you're absorbing, it means that by the time you get into the workforce, everything you do well and not so well will make you better.
I'd say with all of the units you do in marketing, you're usually put into a group assignment type scenario. In my previous course, which was computer science, we never really had the opportunity to sort of work together as much, collaborate on such a regular basis, and I think that sort of thing is sort of key, working in the real world, sort of getting along with your co-workers, sort of harnessing each other's skills, talents, and
I'd like to hear now on the other side of this, give us the hard news, the critical feedback. What is it in your experience that if you had a do-over and we could help you with that, what would be one of the best things we could do for you?
I think in some classes, some units that you do, they sort of give you a lot of material, and as a student you kind of think, okay, well they've given me all this material, I'll look at it later. And I think that's a huge pitfall, because yeah, you may never ever look at it, or you'll look at it just before a test, or look at it for an assignment, or look at it just before the exam.
Yeah, so what's the lesson for the instructor about that is?
I've had a couple of classes which use a flipped classroom model. So basically they get you to learn everything you need to know online before you go up to a workshop. I found that to be very useful actually. It sort of puts the responsibility of learning on me, and so I'm ready for class. I need to jump online, learn what I need to know, and then show up.
Thank you. How about you?
I have to agree, the flipped classroom is much more engaging, because if you have the initiative to read the material, when you actually go into class and you get to have dialogue around the topic, you learn so much more from it, because you've already reflected and analysed everything, or all the material they've given you, the content, you've gone through it already. So by the time you get to the classroom, the only thing that can happen is more layers get added to your knowledge. And for me, that's the most important thing, is actually being engaged. I find that meeting real people, talking to real clients is always more engaging, and creating a report for somebody is always better than doing an assignment that's going to get marked by a tutor.
More bringing of real world in,
yes,
and more responsibility on the learner to get prepared for these deeper conversations that can take place in the classrooms.
I think the biggest thing, touching on engagement, is also like student empowerment. And when you give them the opportunity to control their learning, whether it's the flow that they take information in, the timing that they take the information in, I think that really, it empowers the student. It makes them want to learn. It makes them hungry for knowledge. And I think that's a really powerful thing.
I'd like to thank you all for taking your time out to provide us with feedback. just like the real world people coming into your classes, it makes such a difference. It's very important for us to hear regularly from the students that are here and how the experience goes and what we should be doing about it. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for asking us.
Thank you for having
It was a great opportunity to share our thoughts, and there were some awesome suggestions and ideas on shaping the future of Curtin. So hopefully we'll start to see some being implemented soon. Hockey players suffer injuries like most sports people, but there are certain players who get injuries worse than most. So our Curtin team have set out to help them.
As we're underway in this third international.
So the research projects I'm working on with Hockey Australia is to look at the injury rates in drag flickers. The reason for drag flicking is that in the penalty corner, they're not allowed to hit because it can be dangerous to other players.
And another penalty corner.
So they must drag the ball first and then flick it.
There's a nice shot from Bone, but well saved by Li Dongzhao.
I'm a qualified physiotherapist. I've treated a few drag flickers, and when they demonstrated to me the movement, I said to myself, well, that's a lot of power going through the legs and back, a lot of twisting, and it might lead to injuries. So what I did was to do a survey on about 400 to 500 hockey players, and I compared the difference in injury rates between those that are drag flickers and those that are not. We found that drag flickers are more likely to have injuries in the hip and the back as compared to the non-drag flickers. We were very lucky. We had 8 Masters of Sports and Masters of Manipulative Therapy students. So these are qualified physios that study in postgrads to help us collect data. So we were able to collect data in the international team, so Hockey Australia. Then we also had the national squads, and we were also able to go to local clubs, and they were helpful in completing the surveys. And we also went to national tournaments to collect more surveys. So all up, I think we took about 400 to 450 surveys.
When you're ready, go.
We also asked a few drag flickers to go to our motion analysis laboratory. What we did was ask some of the drag flickers, put some markers on their body, and did a drag flick in the motion analysis laboratory, and we wanted to look at the forces and the movement that's going on in their legs and also their back to see if we can find out potentially what might cause the injuries in drag flickers. And hopefully, as a physiotherapist, my main aim is maybe we can actually reduce some of the injuries.
And they get a result, 1-1.
That's it for this episode of Inside Curtin. If you'd like to find out more about anything you've seen, you can visit the Learning for Tomorrow website at curtin.edu.au. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.